The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. We have Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries, here for our version of the Democratic response tonight.
Perfect. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about that fast-talking, lie-filled speech. It was something.
Well, that's a pretty good description of it. We're going to get right to it. Thanks, Jen.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Well, at the end of a day that began with David Remnick asking the question in The New Yorker, have you ever in your life encountered a character as wretched as Donald Trump? Donald Trump delivered that character to millions of Americans tonight in a 15-minute shouted speech from the White House. Donald Trump's shouting seems to indicate he has not yet learned how microphones actually work. America's worst public speaker struggled mightily reading a teleprompter full of lies tonight. His speech, if we can call it that, in it, Donald Trump said that when he took office, quote, inflation was the worst in the history of our country. That is a lie, a typical Trump lie. Inflation was at 3% when Donald Trump took office. Inflation is at 3% right now. Donald Trump said that when he took office, we had, quote, transgender for everybody. That would mean that Donald Trump is transgender. That would mean that everybody is transgender. It is, of course, Trumpian madness. We did not have transgender for everybody. Donald Trump said, I was elected in a landslide. That is a lie. Donald Trump won by 1.5% of the vote. Donald Trump said they released violent felons, meaning the Biden administration. No president in history has released more violent felons in one day than Donald Trump did on his inauguration day when he pardoned every violent felon who attacked the Capitol on January 6th for him, to try to overturn a presidential election for him. Donald Trump said that tariffs is, quote, my favorite word. Donald Trump lied when he said we made a lot more money because of tariffs. We didn't make any money because of tariffs. America made no money because of that. The Trump tariffs paid to the United States Treasury have all been paid in the United States by Americans. The federal government has simply taken money away from Americans through the Trump tariffs. Americans have had to take money out of their pockets to pay for the Trump tariffs in this country. This is the first time that Donald Trump made a public reference to tariffs without telling the lie that foreign countries pay his tariffs. And Donald Trump lied about the Democrats, saying Democrats are demanding increases in health insurance costs. Donald Trump delivered his speech in a monotone anger. He seemed to be angry at the truth. Joining us now for the Democratic response is the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Please just, I want to offer you an open opportunity to respond to that speech in any way you choose.
Well, it's great to be with you. It was an unhinged speech that was, of course, untethered from reality and truth. You know, Donald Trump has made things worse for the American people. He refuses to acknowledge that the tariffs that he is solely responsible for have actually increased costs on everyday Americans by thousands of dollars per year. At the same time, when it comes to this healthcare crisis, it's one that Republicans have created. It was Donald Trump's one big ugly bill that enacted the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. In that same bill, they ripped food away from hungry children, seniors, and veterans. And all of this was done so that Donald Trump and Republicans could reward their billionaire donors with massive tax breaks, which they've now made permanent. At the same period of time, it was Donald Trump who promised to lower the high cost of living on day one, to lower costs on day one. Those aren't my words, those are his words. But he broke that promise, and life isn't getting more affordable in the United States of America. It's getting more expensive, And that is the problem that Donald Trump refuses to confront.
He said, and these were his exact words, Democrats are demanding increases in health insurance costs.
It's the most ridiculous thing in the world, and everybody knows it. The overwhelming majority of the American people support the Democratic position, which is to make sure that we are driving down health care costs, in part by ensuring that we extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits so that tens of millions of Americans don't experience dramatically increased health insurance premiums, copays, and deductibles. The problem that we've confronted is that Donald Trump and the Republicans are blocking our efforts to try to protect the health care of the American people. But earlier today, of course, we were successful in reaching the 218 signatures necessary to hit the discharge petition threshold, where we will now force an up or down vote on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years.
Now, I saw some coverage about the discharge petition today, which I have to say is an extraordinary achievement by the Democrats and the minority to be able to do that ever. And now you're on a series of discharge petitions after the successful one to get the Epstein files. When the discharge petition for the Epstein files was being considered in the House, and when it was getting close to the required number of signatures, all the coverage of that story indicated that it didn't really matter because the Senate would kill that bill. The Senate would kill the Epstein bill. As it happens, the Senate passed it unanimously. Tonight, people are saying the same thing again. They're saying, well, if the House gets this discharge petition, it doesn't have a chance in the Senate. We have seen that prediction be very, very wrong already this year. Do you think it's possible that the way this story develops day by day, week by week, and this discharge petition vote in the House is now weeks away in January, that by the time we get to that vote, we could be in a different political landscape, and the Senate will definitely be in a different political landscape by then?
Well, Republicans are on the run right now. They're losing elections all across the country. The American people are rejecting their extremism and embracing the Democratic agenda to drive down the high cost of living, fix our broken healthcare system, and of course, extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Abraham Lincoln, as you know, Lawrence, once made the observation that public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. And we know that public sentiment is on our side in terms of extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits and decisively confronting the Republican health care crisis that is devastating working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. And so we know both that the votes exist to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits in a straightforward way, consistent with our legislation, a 3-year extension in the House, and that there's already a bipartisan majority in the Senate that had previously voted in support of a 3-year extension. And as public pressure continues to mount, particularly after the House acts, we believe that there's real opportunity to get this done.
So the current Speaker, Mike Johnson, is on his way to setting a record for the most discharge petitions succeeding against him. Let's listen to what he said today about his control of the House.
Have you lost control of the House?
I have not lost control of the House.
Your reaction to that?
And you know what was interesting, Lawrence, is that he went on to say that this is the narrowest majority that any party has ever had in modern political history. It's probably the only truthful thing that he said in that back and forth. And the reality is that's been the case throughout the entirety of the year. But Mike Johnson, to start this year, started to, brag about the fact that they've got some historic mandate and that the American people were ready to embrace their extremism. Nothing can be further from the truth. And things have been falling apart over the last several months, clearly, and that was accelerated by the decisive defeat by Democrats of Republicans all across the country, up and down the ballot. Now, to your point about the discharge petition, what's been interesting is that we've basically had 3 successive weeks of Democratic-led discharge petitions in partnership with a handful of Republicans behaving in a principled way that have been successful. First, it was a discharge petition that enabled the Epstein files to be released as mandated by the legislation compelling the Department of Justice to do exactly what the survivors have been asking for so there can be transparency and accountability. Then last week, 20 Republicans joined Democrats in successfully moving legislation that wiped out Donald Trump's executive order, which took away collective bargaining rights from more than 1 million hardworking federal employees. That legislation passed the House and is now sitting in the Senate. This week, of course, we've achieved the 218 signatures necessary to force an up or down vote on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. So you've had 3 successful discharge petitions over the last 3 weeks. That's more, Lawrence, as you know, than in the last 30 years combined. So Mike Johnson has already broken a record.
Yeah, that's what you call losing control of the House, to put it mildly. So you picked up 4 Republicans on this discharge petition for the Affordable Care Act subsidies. 3 of them from Pennsylvania, 1 of them from your state of New York. Those members, they voted for the bill that took those subsidies away. Is this the kind of thing that can rectify that vote for them with their constituents when they're facing re-election?
Well, I definitely think, and each of them will be able to speak for themselves, but the pressure has mounted on people throughout the Congress, particularly my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, who are being held responsible for this devastating Republican healthcare crisis. And there's significant pressure that has been brought to bear by the American people, who overwhelmingly, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, support an extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits because they know it's unacceptable to have millions of people who may face dramatic increases in their health insurance premiums in January. In some cases, premiums may increase by $1,000 or $2,000 per month. These are working class Americans. 90% of the people who benefit from the tax credits make around $63,000 per year. And so I think that the public pressure will continue to mount on my Republican colleagues in the House and in the Senate to do the right thing. We believe that Mike Johnson needs to bring the bill to a vote this week, tomorrow. We should not leave town until we vote on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
So there's Mike Johnson desperately trying to say, I have not lost control of the House. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of his most prominent Republican members of the House, has said the dam has broken. She's one of the first Republicans to join a Democratic discharge petition on the Epstein files. She believes the dam has broken. We're going to see more of this.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Here's the problem, and I've said this repeatedly to Mike Johnson, that this my way or the highway approach, where you're trying to jam right-wing extremism down the throats of the American people, is not working. And you can either continue to lose complete control of the House of Representatives, or try to course correct and find a bipartisan path forward to actually getting things done for the American people. We're trying to help them help the American people, help their own constituents, because a significant number of the people who will actually be hurt by a failure to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, just like a significant number of people who are hurt by the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, which was part of their one big ugly bill, are the folks they represent in Republican-run states. So this is not a partisan fight for us, it's a patriotic fight. And we're going to continue to stand up for the health care of the American people and continue to stand up to drive down the high cost of living in this country, which is out of control and getting worse because of Donald Trump and failed Republican policies.
So Donald Trump said tonight that what he wants to do is just give people money to buy health insurance. Just give them money. He didn't say what for. He said he wants to give them money and not give money to health insurance companies. Of course, the money he wants to give them, they then have to use to buy health insurance. So yes, that money, if you did that, would end up at the health insurance company. He doesn't seem to understand that the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, healthcare costs, that is exactly what that is. A tax credit is giving people money to help them pay their health insurance premiums. That is exactly what you're proposing. Donald Trump doesn't seem to even understand what these tax credits are.
Yeah, he seems clueless about that. The only thing they understand are tax breaks that are massive for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected in order to subsidize the lifestyles of the rich and shameless. But when it comes to tax credits for everyday Americans, he claims to be clueless about the thing, and he actually may be, because perhaps there's no interest. The reality is the Affordable Care Act tax credits can be taken either on a monthly basis to lower your health insurance costs, which most Americans elect to do, or you can receive the tax credits when you file your taxes in April. And so that already exists as an option under law. Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand that. Now, we believe as Democrats, yes, we have a broken healthcare system. We need to fix it. And we need to fix it anchored in the principle that in this great country, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, access to high quality and affordable health care cannot simply be a privilege for the wealthiest amongst us. It has to be a right available for every single American. And that's what we're going to continue to work on, anchored in that principle and that value.
Donald Trump's White House Chief of Staff said in her interviews that have now been published in Vanity Fair that Donald Trump knows nothing, absolutely nothing about policy and about what the agencies do. That's her quote, that Donald Trump knows nothing and never will know anything. Did you hear anything tonight about any policy that indicated Donald Trump actually knew what he was talking about?
No, not at all. And, you know, again, he's running away from the fact that he promised to lower costs on day one. Now he wants to act like the affordability crisis is a Democratic hoax. But last year, all he did was talk about how he was going to drive down the high cost of living, how America was too expensive and out of control. And by the way, Lawrence, people are tired of him trying to throw President Joe Biden under the bus. What's been clear in public opinion survey after public opinion survey, the American people know this is Donald Trump's economy, this is the Republicans' economy, and it's been a complete and total disaster. That dog doesn't hunt anymore, and Donald Trump is struggling to find someone who he can actually blame his failed policies on. But unfortunately for him, the American people aren't buying it.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, former Special Prosecutor Jack Smith wanted to testify publicly about the 2 criminal prosecutions he brought against Donald Trump, but House Republicans refused to allow Jack Smith's testimony to be public, and now we know why. Congressman Dan Goldman, who was in the room for Jack Smith's closed-door testimony today, will join us next. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme. That is what former Special Prosecutor Jack Smith told members of the House Judiciary Committee today during a more than 8-hour closed-door testimony about the criminal charges that he brought against Donald Trump in 2 separate federal cases. Jack Smith defended his decision to prosecute Donald Trump for his conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and Donald Trump's possession of classified documents in violation of the Espionage Act. According to portions of his opening statement obtained by MS Now, Jack Smith said, "Our investigation developed proof beyond a reasonable doubt that President Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and to prevent the lawful transfer of power. Our investigation also developed powerful evidence that showed President Trump willfully retained highly classified documents after he left office in January 2021, storing them at his social club, including in a bathroom and a ballroom where events and gatherings took place. He then repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to conceal his continued retention of those documents. The decision to bring charges against President Trump was mine, but the basis for those charges rests entirely with President Trump and his actions, as alleged in the indictments returned by grand juries in 2 different districts. If asked whether to prosecute a former president based on the same facts today, I would do so regardless of whether the president was a Republican or Democrat. Jack Smith volunteered to testify about his findings in a public hearing, but House Republicans refused to allow his testimony to be public.
Chairman Jordan made an excellent decision in not allowing Jack Smith to testify publicly, because had he done so, it would have been absolutely devastating to the president and all of the president's men involved in the insurrectionary activities of January the 6th.
The only reason that Donald Trump did not go to trial and was not convicted is because of the Supreme Court and because of the timing of it and him becoming president. He is guilty of those two indictments, and no bias or anything else ever was involved.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Daniel Goldman of New York. He's a member of the House Judiciary Committee, and he was in the room today for Jack Smith's closed-door testimony. Congressman Goldman, was this a version of a trial? Was this a courtroom atmosphere where the evidence was being weighed?
He did go through a little bit of the evidence, but to be honest, Lawrence, it was less about the specific evidence and more just a demonstration of a purely straight shooting prosecutor who operates by the book, who operated by the book, and even wouldn't answer a lot of questions that we had for him because he was, in my view, overly concerned about potentially violating court orders, which just reinforced his dutiful focus on the rule of law. And that's exactly how he ran these investigations. That is exactly what the indictments revealed. And it is also clearly why Chairman Jim Jordan did not want him to testify publicly. But what we need right away, right now, is that transcript to be released. There is nothing in it that's classified. There is no reason why the American public should not see that transcript. And then the American public should be able to judge for itself whether or not Jack Smith harbored any bias or there was any political influence on anything that he did in charging Donald Trump. And the only way to do that is to have a public hearing.
Well, that transcript is the congressional record. Those are pages now of the congressional record. There is no conceivable reason why that would not be released.
Well, except for Chairman Jim Jordan has control over it. And as we saw during the bungled and sham Biden impeachment investigation, the Republicans will pick and choose and be selective about what the parts of transcripts they will release, whether they will release them altogether, or whether they won't even release them. They are in control, and so they have ultimate responsibility for releasing those transcripts. So I don't know that it'll be released, but let's just remember, he is the first special counsel who was not allowed to publicly testify. This is the volume 2 of the special counsel's report, is the first special counsel's report that has not been turned over to Congress. There is a reason why those two things are firsts. And it is because the allegations by the Republicans and Donald Trump that Jack Smith harbored or used any bias, any political influence at all, are complete and utter bogus. And that is why this was behind closed doors. That is why we do not have volume 2, because it is going to be incredibly incriminating of Donald Trump and others, including Kash Patel, who Jack Smith did acknowledge today testified in front of the grand jury.
And we also learned today, while Jack Smith was testifying, that Dan Bongino is leaving the FBI in that number 2 position in the FBI.
Yeah, it wasn't clear to me he was ever really there. As early as September, a few months after he took over, there was the unprecedented move to put in a co-deputy director. There's no question Dan Bongino was completely unqualified for the job. And I think what ultimately happened to him is what happens when a conspiracy theorist meets the truth. And he had made his reputation on conspiracy theories, especially about the Epstein files. And then he goes into the FBI and realizes, oh crap, I actually now am responsible for releasing all of these things. I can't say there's a conspiracy because I'm on the inside and there's no truth to anything that I've been saying. So he was doomed from the beginning. He was unqualified from the beginning. And it appears that he realizes that his better pathway is on the outside, making bogus allegations about conspiracy theories rather than actually doing the hard and necessary work of the deputy director of the FBI.
Congressman Dan Goldman, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, Donald Trump's FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, had no answers in a Senate hearing today after he tried to get Jimmy Kimmel fired. That's next. The worst FCC chair in history, Donald Trump's FCC chair, Brendan Carr, tried to threaten ABC into canceling Jimmy Kimmel's show.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead.
Despite his thug language, the FCC chair has no legal power to penalize the ABC network in any way for anything that Jimmy Kimmel says. And so Jimmy Kimmel continues to say whatever he wants to say about Brendan Carr's deeply perverse idol, Donald Trump.
The Trumps are hosting multiple Christmas events at the White House this week. Yesterday, after briefly mentioning the shootings in Australia and at Brown, he got distracted by a familiar-looking woman in the crowd.
Then we have a man who, to me, this is the most interesting story. Boy, do you look like Ivanka. Has anyone ever told you that? I'm saying, is that Ivanka? Could you just turn around for the camera? Does she look like Ivanka? It's the most unbelievable thing. So I didn't want to take a chance. I say, is that Ivanka? You look just like Ivanka, which is a great compliment, actually.
What stage of dementia is not recognizing the daughter you are physically attracted to? 11? And again, this was a Christmas party for supporters and staff. Trump bing-bong from random topic to random topic until finally settling into a 6-minute rant about snakes in Peru.
Today, the disgraced Brendan Carr stuck to boilerplate language in refusing to actually answer questions in a Senate hearing.
After Jimmy Kimmel's monologue, you went on a podcast and suggested that ABC should take Kimmel off the air, saying, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Those were your words. Do you think it is appropriate to use your position to threaten companies that broadcast political satire?
I think any licensee that operates on the public airwaves has a responsibility to comply with the public interest standard, and that's been the case for decades.
I asked if you think it's appropriate for you to use your position to threaten companies. And this incident with Kimmel wasn't an isolated event. You've launched investigations into every major broadcast network except Fox. Is that correct?
I don't know if that's true or not. We do have investigations going on NPR and PBS. We have a number of investigations that are ongoing.
Okay, you brought up social media. So do you think it's appropriate for after a horrific murder and the stabbing of Rob Reiner and his wife, do you think it's appropriate for someone to say that it happened when they know better, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome? He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights. Do you think that's appropriate for the President of the United States to do that? And if Jimmy Kimmel would have said that, would you have threatened to take him off the air?
Senator, look, Democrats on this dais are accusing me of engaging in censorship, and now you're trying to encourage me to police speech on the internet. I'm simply not going to do it.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. She serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. He tried to shift that to policing social media when your question was, if Jimmy Kimmel said that, meaning if Jimmy Kimmel said that on his show on ABC, what would your reaction be? And of course, he seemed afraid of even coming close to trying to answer any of your questions.
That's right, Lawrence. And first of all, I want to say how sorry I am. I know that you were close to Rob Reiner and knew him and Michelle, and this was just a horrific tragedy. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is, how dare the President of the United States talk like that about anyone, and yet you've got in front of you Brendan Carr, which I did, who literally has threatened many, and it's not just Jimmy Kimmel, Seth Meyers, he has threatened, he's done investigations of every network except Fox, clearly showing that he's not independent, they're not trying to enforce the law, they're just becoming a tool, he is, of the President of the United States, and he wouldn't answer or whether or not, which he well knows, they were investigating every major network except Fox, which we believe to be true.
As we go forward, what are you expecting from Brendan Carr in this job?
I expect him to do his job. What we should have been talking about today is broadband, getting that funding out and getting it to every corner of the country. It's stalled out. What we should be talking about is spectrum and various things that can be kind of on the nerd spectrum, but are really important for this country right now. We should be talking about the Universal Service Fund, but instead he's using this as a political post and not doing his job. One of the most interesting exchanges was when my colleague Ben Ray Lujan asked him if he felt that the FCC was independent, and he said, no, it's not independent. And then Ben Ray read the website and said, it says it's independent, and shortly thereafter the word came off the website. So this is what Donald Trump is doing. He is politicizing the tools of government, including, as you very well know, the Justice Department, and using this as either revenge or to help his buddies, or to help his billionaire friends. And who is getting hurt in all this is the American people.
In Donald Trump's speech tonight, he said that tariffs is his favorite word.
You mean in his rant? In his rant that ended with Merry Christmas? Okay, just to clarify. All right, yes?
Well, no, go ahead, Senator, your reaction to the speech.
Well, I just thought, it was a rant. And then suddenly at the end, he said, Merry Christmas. And I did feel like he was channeling something other than the Christmas spirit. I think that he was defensive, and so many of the things that he said weren't true. The fact is, he has not brought inflation down. That's what he promised he would do on day one. The fact is, these tariffs, as you just pointed out, that he was so proud of in this speech, have caused countless harm to small businesses. They're a tariff tax on the American people. And ever since he put the tariffs out there, manufacturing jobs have come down every single month, not up. Manufacturing jobs are down. Inflation is not down, but unemployment is at its highest level since the pandemic. Those are the facts.
He told the American people tonight, I brought prices down.
It's just not true. And the problem is, Lawrence, that no matter how much he yells and looks at the camera and tries to blame everyone in sight, the American people are the ones going to the grocery store. They're the ones that know how much it costs now to buy beef for Christmas, or they are trying to get some coffee, or they're looking at toys for their kids, or they're trying to figure out how they're going to afford their health care premiums while still trying to afford the prescription drug copays. They're well aware of what's going on right now. And so no matter how much he tries to distract them or he yells at the camera, in those quiet moments when they're looking at their bills and they're looking at the notices they get on their health care premiums and the doubling and the tripling that's occurred in these states all over the country, particularly red states, they know the truth, and the truth hurts, and nothing he yells about is going to change that. And that's why we today, the Democrats in the Senate, Senator Schumer and several of us, Senator Warren, we put out a very clear cost agenda, what we're focusing on. We're focusing on groceries and household goods. We're focusing on electricity. We're going to be talking about housing and what's happening for the American people when it comes to housing, and then, of course, health care. And it is in their power to do something today. It is in their power to do something next week, the week after that, January, to bring down health care costs. And they are accountable. They run both houses of the Congress and the presidency, and the American people know it.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Great to be on. Thanks, Lawrence.
And coming up, it's the only video of the United States military killing people in very small boats near the coast of Venezuela, thousands of miles away from the United States, that Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth don't want you to see. A former U.S. Army Ranger who saw that unedited video for the first time today of the deadly second strike, killing 2 people who were clinging to the wreckage of a small boat, said there was, quote, no justification for it. That's next. Today, the House and Senate Armed Services Committees were allowed to view the video of a September 2nd military operation that ended with the United States launching a second missile to kill 2 people who were clinging to the wreckage of a small boat in the Caribbean. Democratic Congressman Jason Crow, a former U.S. Army Ranger, said this after seeing that video today.
I can tell you my own conclusions, and my own conclusions are twofold. Number one, there's no reason why they can't release this video, no rationale provided as to why they can't release this video like they have many other videos. I can tell you that I vehemently disagree with the ultimate conclusion to take that second strike, and I saw no justification for it.
The Republican chair of the House Armed Services Committee, Mike Rogers of Alabama, said, I'm satisfied everybody answered all the questions, and I'm also satisfied that this was a lawful process that was followed. My committee is done. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. He is the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman Himes, you were among the very first to see this video as a leader of the Intelligence Committee. What is your reaction to Chairman Rogers saying, my committee is done?
Well, there's a very good chance that the United States military, in the case of these 2 individuals who, again, were, let's stipulate that they were drug runners, but, you know, they had just had a huge piece of munitions go off. Their boat had been destroyed. They were clinging to a piece of wreckage in the middle of the ocean. Our military watched them for a lengthy period of time. And though they were not just incapable of continuing hostilities, which is the standard here, you know, had we walked away or had we not done anything, they would have slipped under the waves and never to be heard of again. The decision was taken to kill them. So you ask about the chairman. The United States military, depending on whether you believe that this war is authorized or not, either murdered 2 individuals or committed a war crime. That's, by the way, by the Pentagon's own standards for what a war crime is, where the standards say that if you attack somebody who has been shipwrecked, that is a war crime. So the fact that the Republican chairman of this important committee has decided that there's nothing to see here, folks, all I can say is he's dead wrong. And number 2, the other thing I want to say is the American public needs to see this video. Jason Crow, who you just interviewed or featured there, you know, is a combat veteran. I've seen a lot of these videos over the years, and this was very, very different. This wasn't taking out a bunch of guys with AK-47s on their way to do something terrible. This was 2 guys who were completely distressed, without any ability to continue hostilities against anybody, and we killed them.
So, Congressman, they watched this for a number of hours after the. You tell me, how much time transpired between the first missile strike and the second one?
Yeah, I don't want to get into super specific details because there are reasons why some of that stuff is classified, but I will tell you that it was a lengthy period of time. It was not the fog of war, as the Secretary of Defense tried to say. There was a lot of time, more than 5 minutes, more than 10 minutes, more than 15 minutes, in which our surveillance watched these 2 individuals. They didn't, and we know absolutely clearly that they did not have weapons. They did not have a radio. Admiral Bradley suggested that, yeah, well, maybe they might have dived under the wreckage and found a radio to call a boat, and we're not quite certain that they were there. So, I mean, to answer your question, we watched these two. This is part of the reason that the video is so grim. It wasn't quick. We watched them for a long time. Apparently, there were discussions in the Pentagon with lawyers and others, and after a lengthy period of time, they decided to kill these two individuals.
So one way of putting it is they lost patience. They were watching two people in the ocean who, as you pointed out, were on their way to drowning. That's what was going to happen. They weren't going to make it to shore. Sharks wouldn't get them, or they were going to drown. Anyone who has ever seen any kind of vessel in distress at sea knows what was going to happen to them. They could have just watched that. They could have watched that for hours on end. Or they could have waited for this so-called rescue boat of their co-conspirators to show up and then maybe taken a shot at that one, if that's the way they wanted to approach it. It seems like, let's just get out of here. We're done. We don't have any more patience to watch this anymore. Let's kill them.
Well, Lawrence, under the law, there is a legal requirement in a situation like that to render aid, okay? And in fact, am I crazy to say that? No, I'm not. You know why I know I'm not crazy to say that? Because several weeks later, in exactly the same situation, you had two drug runners in the water. And as you will recall, in that later, and I suspect later means after lots of consideration over what they had done in the boat strike that we're talking about, they rescued the two individuals, right? And here we're told that these are the worst of the worst, narco-terrorists who are dedicated to the destruction of the American people. So did we try them in a court of law? Did we indict them? Did we put them in Guantanamo? No, we did not. We sent them back to their home countries. If I recall correctly, that was Colombia and Ecuador. Why did that happen? They rescued them in that instance, I think, because they thought twice about what they had done in the September 2nd strike. And, oh, by the way, sent them to their home countries, because the last thing the administration wants is to have these guys testifying in courts and their lawyers saying, what is the authority to do what you're doing here?
Congressman Jim Himes, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.
We'll be right back. Congressman Jim Himes gets tonight's last word.